Hello and welcome to the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. I'm the sports editor here at the Herald Democrat, Jason Della Rosa, and we are in the middle of the football season. Week 5 has taken place. Week 6 is on tap. We are halfway to the playoffs, people, and things are starting to heat up as just about everybody has played at least one district ball game. Some of the smaller 2A schools that we'll get to at the end, they're still in non-district play, but for the most part, everyone has played a game that will affect their playoff future. So how we're going to do it going forward is we're going to break it down by district and then get into the games in that week's district to kind of give you an overview of what's going on, where the standings are, as we get later in the season, who's clinched a playoff spot, who's in the mix for a playoff spot, all those sorts of things. So that's how we're going to handle the rest of the season. So we're going to start at the top with District 7-5A, Division 1. That's where you find Sherman. And after their first week of district games, McKinney North, John Tyler, and West Mesquite are all 1-0. Sherman, Texas High, and Wiley East are all 0-1. And Mesquite Poteet had the bye. And that is who the Bearcats will be hosting on Friday night. They'll be welcoming them to Bearcat Stadium for this contest. Sherman is 3-2, 0-1 after that 49-28 loss against McKinney North. Mesquite Poteet comes in with a 1-3 record. Non-district has not been kind to them, but the bye for them kind of came at the right time. They were able to regroup, and they're going to try to come away with a win. Last year, this game was pretty close. 29-13 was the final. Poteet jumped out pretty early, made a big play on special teams, and was able to kind of hang on there. They're led by Seth McGowan, their running back. He's committed to Oklahoma. He's a 4-star recruit, and things are kind of expected to run through him. He had a big game 2 weeks ago. When they actually picked up their win. He ran for 175 yards and a touchdown. So they're starting to pick things up. Sherman's going to try to regroup. They were on a 3-game winning streak before they weren't able to keep pace with North. Sherman was up 21-14 after the first quarter. Looked like it was going to be a shootout. McKinney North has played a lot of shootouts. We've mentioned that with them before. And then things kind of grinded to a halt for Sherman. They were down 39-28 at halftime. And the defense did a really good job. I know you say it's 39 points at halftime, 49 points in the game. McKinney North has scored in the 50s basically on everybody. So to be able to have it be a semi-close game, they only scored 10 points in the second half against the Bearcats. So there were opportunities. They just couldn't keep pace. Benji Amayabu had another long touchdown run, 66 yards. Gage Smith had a 63-yard touchdown catch from Tate Bethel, who also connected with Jacoby Hunt for a touchdown in the first quarter. For those who may have seen, Gage Smith got hurt and didn't return, but he's expected to go, according to Coach Martinez, this week, so he should be back on both sides of the ball. And Mike Brown finished with 16 carries for 78 yards. So, it's bad from the standpoint that Sherman won this game last year, and that set them up in a good spot to end up eventually making the playoffs. But it's only the first game. There's still 5 more of these to come, and Sherman's in a decent spot to still return to the playoffs. So they can pull this off. Mesquite Poteet did finish second in the district last year, so this will be a nice test to see kind of where they sit going into Sherman's bye, which is next week. So you always want to go into a bye week off a victory, kind of have those good feelings for a couple weeks before getting back to work. The next district is District 7-5A Division 2, and that's where Denison is. That's a district because of its size. They already have played 3 games, 3 weeks worth of games, and Frisco High is the only undefeated team. They're sitting at 3-0, while Denison, Frisco Reedy, and Denton Braswell are all 2-1. Lovejoy and Princeton are 1-1 because they've both had byes so far. Lebanon Trail is at 1-2. Lake Dallas is at 0-2, and Frisco Memorial is at the back with an 0-3 record. So it's a pretty interesting race. There's still a bunch of games to be played, but Denison's in a good spot, and they're at 3-2 overall, and they're welcoming Lake Dallas, who is at 1-3 overall, and like we mentioned, is 0-2 in district. Lake Dallas had the district bye last week, and that was something very needed for them because, like I said, they're 1-3. Things have not been going well. The offense has been scuffling. The last game that Lake Dallas played before the bye was against Princeton, and that's who Denison played last week. So we have a bit of a comparison there. Denison won 52-31 against Princeton. Lake Dallas lost 31-21 against Princeton. So if you want to play the transitive property theory, that would be in Denison's favor. Jackets, again, big numbers on offense. They were up 28-3 after the first quarter. They had a season-high 531 yards. Caleb Hebner threw for 216 yards and 3 touchdowns. Asa Osborne ran for 164 yards on just 15 carries and scored twice. Hebner also scored twice on the ground. And like we said, it was 28-3 after the first quarter, 38-17 at halftime. Princeton was really never close in that game. And Lake Dallas has a situation which could be interesting since they're coming off the bye. Their original starting quarterback to the season, Brandon Engel, he has not played in district play because he had a leg injury. He started the year, and he wasn't 100% to start the year. He played the first game and a half. He was replaced by Trevor Moon, and he has started the last 2.5 games. So with the extra week, the question is going to be, does Engel come back? He's a great athlete. He's committed to Air Force. He was a first team all-district receiver last year. Gave a lot of people a lot of problems. So the question is going to be, 1, is he able to play this week? And 2, does he either go back to quarterback or do they put him at receiver because Moon has had a bunch of time and experience at the quarterback spot. So that'll be something to watch for if he's out there this week or not. That could be a game-time decision, much like Denison's had with Jadarian Price at running back for a couple games. Kind of one of those, get out there and test it, see what percentage you're at, that sort of thing. And if Denison wins, like we mentioned with Sherman, you're going into Denison's bye is next week to be 3-1 going into the bye, and then see what else happens in the district. You could be tied for first place. At worst, you'd be in a tie for second place, and you'd set yourself up really well going into the final month of games for them to try to get back to the playoffs. The next district is District 4-3A Division 1, and that's where we find Whitesboro. They opened up district play last week, so Whitesboro, Pilot Point, and Boyd are all 1-0. Brock, Paradise, and Ponder are the teams that are 0-1, and Bowie had the bye. So Whitesboro is going to host Pilot Point. So we have someone who's going to stay in first place. The only question is, will Boyd join them? So it's a nice early test for both of these teams since they're both undefeated in district. Whitesboro came from behind to beat Paradise 28-20, while Brock was Pilot Point's opponent, and Pilot Point was able to come away with the hard-fought 20-14 win there. So they both have a common opponent in Gunner. Whitesboro lost to Gunner 49-7, and Pilot Point lost to close out non-district play 35-0. Pilot Point's only lost; they're 4-1, and Whitesboro's 3-2. So they both played Gunner relatively the same, so that could be interesting. Whitesboro's trying to go 2-0 in district for the 4th time in 6 seasons. One of those times that they did not was last year, because after they beat Paradise, Pilot Point was able to sneak out a 28-25 victory. So last year's game was close. I think both teams are pretty good. Both teams are looking to make the playoffs again this year, so it should be a good matchup. Last week in the win against Paradise, Whitesboro was able to use the ground game. They had 327 yards, and only 26 of that was in the air. They ran 49 times for 301 yards. Cade Acker had 16 carries for 117 yards. Devin Price had 15 carries for 111 yards. Jacob Smith had 15 for 56. So kind of a three-headed monster type thing there. Acker scored once, and Reeves scored twice, and 3 of the touchdowns were in the fourth quarter. Paradise had a 14-7 lead going to the fourth quarter. Whitesboro tied it. Paradise returned the ensuing kickoff 89 yards for a touchdown to go back up 20-14, and then in the final 6 minutes, Whitesboro scored twice, not only to take the lead, but to extend that lead and be able to come away with a win. So a good start to district play for the Bearcats. The next district to talk about is District 5-3A Division 1. They also started district play last week. Pottsboro, Van Alstyne, and Howe, three of the local teams that we're going to talk about their games, they all start 1-0. Rains, Commerce, and Bonham are the 0-1 teams, and Lone Oak is the team that had the bye to start. So the big matchup is Pottsboro visiting Van Alstyne. Van Alstyne is the defending district champ. They're both 1-0. Pottsboro is 5-0 on the season. Van Alstyne is 2-3. So this I don't want to say this is going to decide the district championship, but I think whoever wins this game obviously is in the driver's seat to claim the top spot, has a really good chance to go undefeated. So Van Alstyne's not going to want to give up that crown very easily. They've won 11 straight district games. That's the ties for the second longest district winning streak in school history, matching one from 1949 to 1950. And the only longer streak was 22 games from 91 to 94. So Van Alstyne's on a roll when it comes to district games. And they've won the last two in this series. And the last time that Van Alstyne beat Pottsboro 3 years in a row came in from 1984 to 1986. So it's going to be hard because Pottsboro is coming off back-to-back 60-plus point games. That's the first time they've ever done that in program history. And the Cardinals set the school record for points last week in their 63-14 win over Commerce. Van Alstyne had a little tougher time. They had to rally. They were down 21-0 after the first quarter, but they ended up coming away with a 29-21 victory over Rains. So to touch on each of those games, in Pottsboro's win against Commerce, Braden Plyler led the way again. He threw for 173 yards and 3 touchdowns, and he ran for 4 touchdowns, finishing with 9 carries for 78 yards. Cy Shope finished with 12 carries for 114 yards and a touchdown. Titus Lyons was the big receiver in that one. He had 3 catches for 79 yards and 2 scores. It was 56-0 at halftime, and Pottsboro was able to cruise there. So not much of a test there. I think this week will be a little bit tougher. Obviously, like I said, you have the defending district champs in Van Alstyne, who had a big game from Jake Carroll. The senior running back had 15 carries for 188 yards and scored twice. And in the passing game, Dre Davis had 4 catches for 101 yards and 2 touchdowns. And like we said, it was 21-0 after the first quarter. It was 21-6 at halftime. And Rains never scored after that first quarter. Van Alstyne was able to battle back. They had almost 500 yards of offense. They ran for 322 yards and threw for another 149 with Gavin Montgomery taking over at quarterback there. So it was a good bounce back game for Van Alstyne. They've kind of been up and down. And like I said, Pottsboro's undefeated. So that's the matchup to watch here in this district for sure. The next game is Howe hosting Emory Rains. The Bulldogs are off to their 1-0 start, like we mentioned. They're 2-3 overall, as is Rains. Rains had the loss to Van Alstyne that we mentioned. Howe picked up a big win, 66-28 against Bonham. And they're trying for a 2-0 district start for the first time since 2015. And it's only the third time since 2004 if it were able to happen. So a big offensive outburst last week by the Bulldogs. They scored 60-plus points in a game for just the second time in the past 28 years. The other time in that time span was when they scored 77 against Tom Bean 4 years ago, and that's the school record right there. So Jalen Thornton led the way in that game. He had 17 carries for 216 yards and 4 touchdowns. Brandon Williams had a touchdown on the ground, and he caught a touchdown. Austin Haley led the passing attack. He was 10 of 17 for 301 yards and 3 touchdowns. It was big plays in the passing game. Caden Harmon had 101 yards on just 2 catches and a touchdown. Jordan Jones's only catch was for 73 yards and a touchdown. And Williams' catch was a 46-yard touchdown catch. And Colby Wyndon's catch didn't go for a touchdown, but that picked up 51 yards. So it was a big game for the Bulldogs. They had almost 600 yards of offense. It was 594. So very, very positive start to district for Howe. They didn't win a district game last year, so they're already ahead of the game in that regard, and it'd be interesting to see if they can pick up a couple more, kind of stay in the race as we get going deeper into district. The next district is District 5-3A Division 2, and both of the local teams are playing each other this week. Gunner, City View, and Henrietta all started district last week with wins, so they're all 1-0. Nakona, SNS, and Callisburg were the teams that lost, so they're 0-1, and Holiday was the team that had the district bye. So Gunner will be hosting SNS. You have 4-1 Gunner against 0-5 SNS. This is a game that was not close last year. It was 59-0 in favor of Gunner. And last week Gunner opened with Nakona, and they won that game 58-6, while SNS lost against City View 48-0. The last two meetings between these schools, Gunners won by a combined 112-0 margin, and that's where things have stood. Obviously, Gunner's been consistently one of the top teams in 3A Division 2 in the last 4 years. They're number 4 in the state, according to the Dave Campbell's rankings again this week. And SNS is still trying to get that first win in a while. They're on a 16-game losing streak, dating back to the end of the 2017 season. It's the third longest streak in school history. They had an 18-gamer from 2010 to 2011, and the 30-gamer is the school record from 1967 to 70. So it's going to be really hard to do that this week. I don't know if that's in the cards for SNS. Like we've said about the Rams, they have gotten better. They're showing a better effort against some of their opponents than they did against them last year. But things are just it's hard. Once you get that breakthrough, I think you're in a good place. But sometimes it's hard to just get that breakthrough. So against City View last week, they had under 150 yards. Colby McSpadden led them on the ground. He had 20 carries for 56 yards. But they only threw 57. I mean, Jake Reynolds completed 11 passes, and they only gained 57 yards. Blake Smith was the main recipient of those. He had 7 catches for 53 yards. So, and City View's a team that's 4-1. They're one of those teams in that district. I think the top 3 teams are Gunner, City View, and Holiday. Those are the 3 teams that are going to be fighting for the district title, and maybe the top 3 spots in the pecking order for seeding. So, I think some of the teams towards the bottom, I think SNS has a chance to pick somebody off. But Gunner's going to be a tough opponent to do that against this week. They won last week, like we said, 58-6. It was 15-6 after the first quarter, and then it was 34-6 at halftime. So, Gunner kind of does that to teams. The defense has been really good again this year for them. If it wasn't for that first quarter touchdown, they would have had another shutout. They only allowed Nakona to pick up 4 first downs and 114 yards. So, that's typical Gunner defense, the way they've been. They did a lot of their damage on the ground. They ran for 326 yards, and nobody had more than 65. So it was a very spread out sort of attack, because that's kind of how Gunner does things. Nobody had more than 8 carries, and nobody had more than 65 yards. The guy who did the main damage, though, was Peyton Lowe. He had a pair of touchdown runs. He returned an interception, 18 yards for a touchdown, and he also blocked an extra point and ran that back for the 2-point conversion. So he did most of the damage. Mitchell Brewer was a quarterback. Didn't have to throw a lot. He only had 39 yards passing, but he completed 4 of his 6 throws. One of those was a 5-yard touchdown pass to David Denton, and he also ran for 2 short runs when they got near the goal line. And then Ethan Sloan capped that win off with a touchdown run in the third quarter. I mean, it was 58-6 through 3 quarters, and that's so it probably could have been a little bit worse than that. But one of those games where Gunner kind of flexed their muscles a little bit. So we'll see if anybody can knock them off. I think, like I said, City View and Holiday are the 2 teams that probably have the best chance to unseat the Tigers as the defending district champs. In District 9-3A, that's where we're going to head next. After 1 week of games, Bells, Cooper, and Chisholm are all 1-0. Whitewright, Leonard, and Prairieland are all 0-1. And Blue Ridge is the team that had the district bye. They actually played a game, and we'll talk about them here next because they're going to play Whitewright. I will mention that the team that does have the bye this week is one of our teams, Bells. So they're going to kind of see how things play out in district play, and then they'll get back to work next week. So they're the ones that have the bye. Blue Ridge, like I said, had the bye last week. They actually played a game. They lost 47-21 against Pantego Christian, and they're sitting at 2-2. While Whitewright is coming off a 42-33 loss against Paris Chisholm in the district opener. They're sitting at 3-2 and 0-1. Now, obviously, the biggest storyline in this game is Whitewright head coach Kevin Wiggins came from Blue Ridge, so he's going up against either some former assistants and, of course, all of those kids came up in the program under him. This was a game last year that Blue Ridge won 42-0. Blue Ridge was a playoff team last year. Whitewright just missed out. But as we've mentioned on the podcast before, Whitewright's already surpassed their win total from last year. They went 2-7. They were already 3-2 so far this year. So they're better. And before last week, Whitewright hadn't scored 33 points in a game and lost in 3 years. So the offense is showing that it can get things done. Dylan Cordell last week had pretty much all of the offense for Whitewright. They put the ball in his hands to let him go to work. He had 14 carries for 161 yards, and he scored all 5 of the Tigers' touchdowns. Marshall Mangrum threw for 93 yards. Cordell had 2 catches for 26 yards, but most of the work was done on the ground. It was one of those kind of shootouts. I guess a run out because Chisholm ran for 359 yards. They only passed for 15. So, but it was a game that last year was not very close for Whitewright. And again, I think this is another one of those measuring stick kind of games where Blue Ridge won last year 42-0. Is this a game they can win? / is this a game that will be a lot more competitive? Whitewright has already shown that they're better than last year. They were more competitive in that game against Chisholm. The question is going to be, can they continue the upward trajectory so that way when we get towards the end of the season, they're in the mix for one of those playoff spots. So those are all the district games that we have this week. There are 3 games that are non-district games still. Again, those 2A schools, they don't start district play for another couple weeks because the districts are not as big. The first non-district game to talk about is Collinsville visiting Lindsay. Both of the teams are 3-2. Collinsville had its 3-game winning streak snapped last week when they went on the road and lost 32-26 against Seymour, while Lindsay was able to come up with a 15-7 win against Celeste. Now, this game last year was a lopsided one. Collinsville won 36-7, but their games this year have been extremely close. 4 of the 5 games have been decided by 9 points or less, and like I said, that included last week. It was kind of a back and forth sort of game. It was tied at 20 at halftime. Seymour led after the first quarter. They were up 26-20 going in the fourth quarter. They extended the lead, and then Collinsville was able to get a touchdown, but they couldn't get the next one to either force overtime or take the lead. Trey Shelby again led the Pirates. He had 23 carries for 169 yards and 2 touchdowns. And Luis Hernandez led the passing attack. Very efficient, 14-25, passing for 163. Justin Hernandez had 6 catches for 64 yards, and Nathan Bocanegra had 2 catches for 46 yards and a touchdown there. So Collinsville's playing close games up until, they had a chance to get a 4-game winning streak. Lindsay's success has come on the defensive end. Like we mentioned, they won last week 15-7. In the 3 wins, Lindsay has allowed a total of 13 points. So if Lindsay wins, they're shutting you down. If they're losing, they're not shutting you down. So if it's a low-scoring game, going to be interesting because you have a team that plays close games, and you have a team that, when they win, the defense is really good. So that should be an interesting matchup between the Knights and the Pirates. The next game in non-district play this week, Tom Bean visits Era. This is an interesting game for the Tomcats because they seem to start getting things going with district play right around the corner. They are 1-4, but the one came last week. They won 36-28 against Chico, while Era is still searching for their first win. they lost 45-6 against Electra. And this was a matchup last year that Tom Bean won 58-20. So it would be very nice for the Tomcats to get on a little back-to-back wins before going into district play, which will be around the corner. Last week, there was a quarterback change for Tom Bean. They put Ryan Weems behind center, and that was a move that paid off. He ran 16 times for 94 yards and a couple touchdowns. He threw for 115 yards and a touchdown, and also returned an interception for a touchdown. So that was a game where Tom Bean was up at halftime by 6. Then they were down by a point, and then they were able to hang on at the end. They came up with 6 turnovers. 6 interceptions, not just turnovers. And so that's a good sign for Tom Bean. They've had a couple games that they've had a chance to win. They came up short. They had a couple games get away with them, so they were able to get the win, and that's big. Era has struggled offensively. They've not scored more than 12 points in a game this season, and every game they've lost has been by 3 touchdowns. So, like I said, it's a very good chance for Tom Bean to get some momentum going into district play. It looks like it's going to be an interesting district. Collinsville's in their district. Celeste is in their district. Trenton's in their district, and they're off to a good start over there in Trenton. So we'll see what people are looking like after this week, and then the bye next week. So it'll be interesting to see if Tom Bean can keep their winning ways going for another week when they go on the road. And the last game this week, another non-district game. Alvord is at Tioga. The Bulldogs and Alvord, they're both 2-3. Alvord won last week to get there, 52-23 against Petrolia, and Tioga is coming off a 46-14 loss against Wolf City. In the loss to Wolf City, it was only 7-0 after the first quarter, but then Wolf City kind of got their running game going like they normally do, and they did that without their leading rusher, Dylan Wilson, who got hurt the week before against Tom Bean. The Wolves still ran for 423 yards. They scored 4 times in the second quarter. It was 34-14 at halftime, and Tioga wasn't able to mount any sort of a comeback in the second half as the Wolves held them off the scoreboard. Tioga's allowing 36.7 points per game in their losses, so that's kind of one of their things with them. When they win, they're holding people down. They don't have to. They're not scoring as much, but the losses are getting away from them. Alvord almost came into this game on a 4-game losing streak. They'd lost 3 in a row before they were able to beat Petrolia. And like we've said about Tioga before, this is another team like Whitewright. They are having a better season than they did last year. They've already won more games than they did last year when they went 1-10. So they're already ahead of that with the 2 wins this year. They have a playoff spot already locked up because their district is so small. So it's all about getting better every week. And maybe this week was kind of a step back over the win that they had against Celeste the week before. But Caleb McKinney had a 60-yard touchdown catch. That was his only catch. Caleb Scott had 12 carries for 57 yards and also caught 4 passes for 33 yards and had a rushing touchdown in that one. So it'll be interesting to see once they get into district play. Again, Air is in their district. So if you want to pay attention to that, Tioga people, since they're playing Tom Bean this week. Munster's in their district, so that'll be interesting. And also Cumbie's in their district, and Cumbie actually has the best record so far. They're 4-1. Munster's sitting at 3-2, and like we mentioned, Ayers at 0-5. So at the very least, Tioga's probably going to be shooting for 3rd place in that district. If they can get better than that, that'd be a really big jump up for them. Once we get into district play in a couple weeks with those guys. So that's a look back at week 5. That's a look ahead to week 6. Like I said, a lot of teams will be on bye next week. And so you've got a lot of interesting things as we get into district play full swing. Hope you enjoyed all the information, and we will check back with you next week.